So I just copied everything on the screen as just pure text, threw it into ChatGPT, and I was like, hey, put this in chart format for me or table format. And just did it, threw it over there. I was able to summarize how much the customer spent in a matter of that took me 5 seconds. Whereas formatting this before would have taken me fucking 30 minutes or God knows how long, right? Or I just wouldn't have done it because I'm like, that's going to take way too long.
In this topic, we're going to talk about different customer service, I guess.
Styles.
Yeah, styles or approaches that we've recognized over the last little bit and how, I guess, advantageous they are to business. And we've seen firsthand working with these particular businesses. And one of the things that I've noticed and that you actually picked up on is working with the law firm in Toronto that I work with, the fucking Big Dick Law Firm.
Yeah, one of the most reputable law firms in all of Canada, probably even the world, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't know about. Let me put this on. I'm getting fucking lit up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe the world. So, and they will remain nameless for whatever reason. So the way that they've dealt with me is they rarely never pick up the phone. Whenever they're available, I could tell they pick up the phone. Sometimes they might be in court or whatever, but they always pick up the phone. And I know why they always pick up the phone. It's because they bill, okay,
per minute.
Yeah, and I'm high maintenance, and when I want to know the answer, I want to know the answer right away, and talk through the answers. So when they're billing per minute, it's advantageous for them to actually pick the phone up. Also, one of the things that they do is when you send them an email, they'll recognize that the email is received and respond accordingly, as well with maybe an estimate of when we could expect an answer, which is very helpful. And it's only really helpful because the reason why I find it helpful is because you're not left in the dark. I don't like that. For me, I'm a big proponent of not being unaware of things or being left in the dark, like I just mentioned. I would much rather. I think I mentioned this in another.
Yeah, we were talking about this, about
podcast.
You wanting to know the worst case scenario much more than just not knowing a scenario at all.
Exactly. I have a hard time. I have a hard time with the unknown because my brain starts to race. And it always reverts to the unknown, and I work out the worst case scenario. I'll work out the worst case scenario in my mind, and then work from there, and almost try to accept the worst case scenario outcome. And if I can accept the worst case scenario outcome, then I feel, anything from that point on will be even, it'll be gravy. Yeah. So whether or not that's a good approach to everything, it's irrelevant. But you were mentioning that you think that that's actually maybe potentially an advantage. But the only reason why it's an advantage is working it out, coming to a solution in the event the worst case scenario happens, but not dwelling on it, which I tend to somewhat do. And, going off into this tangent, one of the things that we came across on how to solve that was, when you're the type of person that is always thinking of the worst case scenario, that's fine. Think of the worst case scenario, come to a solution for the worst case scenario, and then move the fuck on. And one of the ways that I'm solving that issue of moving on is getting the answers for worst case scenario right away, or getting the answer for whatever scenario we're in, whether it be worst case or not. Typically, what we found is it's somewhere in the middle. It's never worst. It's never the greatest. It's somewhere in the middle. So if you can arrive at the answer or the solution sooner than later, that's the best situation. How do you arrive at the solution sooner than later? You engage the people that have the right answers at all costs. And maybe you even engage, what we found to be helpful, AI, ChatGPT, or whatever. Find the solutions, no matter the means. or do whatever you can to find the solution.
Because you might not execute on the recommendations from ChatGPT, but you at least will be able to become educated in whatever that topic is, understanding all of the nuances, and then you're like, okay, now at least I understand what's going on here.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things, even in terms of like reducing your overall anxieties in anything in life, but even like especially things in work, is that if you're able to become educated on all of the aspects of whatever that thing is, then you're like, okay, well, I now know everything that could happen here.
Yeah.
I might not know exactly what to do, but I at least know all of those things.
Yeah. And one of the ways that this is actually a great way. So a lot of people ask me how I use AI. And this is a perfect example where we arrived at an issue that we thought was a really big issue.
Once again, because it was unknown.
Because it was unknown. And sometimes these issues, because we deal with regulatory bodies, it's hard to interpret how the regulatory bodies expect us to interpret their regulations. So, in an effort to speed up the process, we arrived at least somewhat of a guidance, some level of guidance from engaging AI and asking it very particular questions surrounding these particular regulations and how to navigate them. Although it didn't provide all of the nuances, because we then engaged the right professionals in order for us to come to a solution, it still at least, number one, gave me some sort of sense of help me out here. Comfort.
Yeah, comfort.
Some level of comfort in, okay, here's the certain things that need to be done. It may not be all of them, or there may be more unknowns, or there might be less or more, or whatever they're spitting out in terms of results. But at least here's a lot of nuances, not nuances, but here's a lot of technical information that you have to look into. Now you have to figure out the nuances, and then you engage the professional about the nuances. So it shaves off a lot of the educational learning curve, I feel, in terms of, okay, how do you get from point A to Z, right? It'll get you maybe to like Y, and then like the last few letters. What's the last letter? What's the last three letters in the fucking alphabet?
XYZ.
XYZ. Yeah, it'll get you to X. I'm thinking in my head. It'll get you to X, right? And then YZ is when you engage a professional.
Exactly.
So it also will save you a lot of money, right? Because now you have targeted questions to ask the professionals, right? And if you're off base, they'll or if you're out of line, they'll bring you back in line, right? So you have X, Y, and Z in terms of the nuances, and then you get to fucking Z, and that's it.
But even if you think of the conversation that we had with that lawyer, who probably how much do you think he charges per hour? I mean, you might know. You might have gotten the bill already, but
I didn't yet. Probably over $800 for sure, because they're all. I would imagine they're probably all in the same range that I work with. So
you have to, like, if you're thinking about this at $800 an hour, a huge portion of a lawyer's job for situations like this is likely educating the client on whatever it is. If we're bypassing, so we're able to go into this conversation already understanding all of these different technical things. So we can already have that conversation in terms of, he doesn't need to actually like bring us up to speed. Think about how that's probably 80% of the conversation right there.
100%.
Because we're already familiar with this, with that, this form, this filing system, this, whatever. So he can just say, okay, this is exactly what you do immediately.
For sure.
Not like, okay, well, this is the regulatory body. There's these different exemptions. There's this form. This is what the form has. Like, we've already gone through all those steps. And I think that's where AI is very valuable, because it already educated us on all those things, and we can go straight to the lawyer and say, okay, listen, we already know all of this stuff. What is it exactly that we need to do?
Exactly.
Right? Because we'll be able to have your interpretation of our business. AI can't interpret our business of exactly what we need to be doing. Another thing that I have been finding that AI is really good at for me recently is, one of the issues I find with Google is that when you're trying to find information about something, Google sometimes gives you like a few examples. Let's say that there's a comprehensive list of 20 things in a certain topic. Google will be like, okay, well, there's like these 3 or 4 things. And you're like, okay, well, I want to know every single fucking thing that it could be. That's what AI I found yesterday. I was trying to research something, and it's like, hey, here's an example of these 5 things. I'm like, no, I don't want examples. I want a comprehensive list of every single fucking thing that it could be. And I said, okay, here's everything it could be. Now, here's most likely what it will be, but here's a comprehensive list. Because like you just mentioned before, is not having the unknown is what gives people the anxiety and
100%.
making their fucking wheels in their head spin nonstop.
Yeah, it'll also provide some context that you might not have even known, which is exactly how we arrived at this.
Yeah.
We didn't even know about a potential issue. Now, to be honest with you, this is actually probably one of the only times that I've come to learn about a potential issue and it actually be extremely favorable in a non-issue. I've never experienced something like this
Almost like the
in
reverse.
fucking 15, 20 years of it not landing somewhere in the middle, like somewhere between 40 and 60% of an issue, right? Where it's like 10% both ways from halfway, right? Where it was like probably, I don't know, like a 90% or 95%. Like maybe there's a couple things we got to tighten up on, maybe, but don't really seem to be a really big issue. So, and we arrived at that pretty quick because we were able to extract a lot of the questions that we had from AI, but ask the nuanced questions to the professional with the context already, right? With how we were asking it and what we were asking it. And then he provided the answers. It was very quick. It was actually very quick. And then obviously, like you mentioned, also time savings, right? Like they don't have to, they don't have to. We asked him a couple questions that he wasn't actually familiar with, which in hindsight, we could have gone down that rabbit hole a little bit further and probably have gotten the answer, which we didn't really even need him to because we probably could have arrived at the answer and then realized, because the answers that he provided was basically like, hey, like it doesn't make sense for you to do it.
Are you talking about the crowdfunding exemption?
Yeah, exactly. So it would probably made a lot of sense for us to just kind of go down that rabbit hole a little bit further and then come to the realization like, hey, it probably doesn't work for us, instead of like paying him to find out that it doesn't work for you either. Yeah. Right. But it's the nuanced things that he didn't necessarily want to put in writing that was very valuable, because he has the experience with the law. Yeah. That's relevant to what we're discussing here, that you wouldn't be able to pull from, for example, AI, because AI seems to be a little bit more black and white. And it seems to be, depending on what you ask, it's a little bit biased, and it's not going to provide shades of gray, right?
One of the other things that I've been using AI for a lot recently is, well, I guess like two things. So one, in my role in the company, I use Excel all the time, right? And so sometimes figuring out like how to get to a certain result on Excel. Okay. I'm like, okay, I have a really complicated if-then statement so I know I want to use an if-then statement on Excel, but I'm like, okay, there's like several nuances. There's several scenarios that I need to, okay, if this happens, then you want to do this. But if it's this in this range, then I want this. But if it's over this, I want this. So like there's several components to this. I only know a very basic if-then statement, right? If this is greater than 0,
did you use it for that tiered system?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I was like, hey, here's what I'm trying. I just typed out, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm trying to accomplish that if this number is less than this, I want this to happen. If this is between these numbers, I want this to happen. And if this is greater than this. And so there's several components to it. And it gave me a long ass fucking formula, right? Because there's like several. And it worked. Right? Yeah. Wow. So that's one thing that I found very valuable recently. And so now it's like, okay, I can type in what I'm trying to accomplish on Excel, and then it'll just spit out the formula. And then if I'm like, oh, I want something actual table format, I can put it into table format as well.
Interesting.
Another thing that I used it for yesterday that was really valuable was some of the times when it comes to Excel and Google Docs, formatting is a fucking bitch. Like I'm at the point in time, I don't want to spend my time
when you say
formatting.
When you do what?
Formatting. Yeah,
doing what though?
Like let's say on this, especially like Google Docs, let's say you have to copy and paste a bunch of data from one place over to another one. And it's just all the formatting's fucked up. The cells are shifted, you're skipping lines, like sometimes they're all pasting into one cell. Whatever. Or on Google Doc, and like I fucking hate Microsoft Word. Like I hate it with a fucking passion.
I don't know why anybody still even uses that
my
shit.
God, and all these old companies.
What is the reason why anybody would even still use Microsoft Docs? Like there's barely any shareability with it. You gotta like, I don't understand. I'm not saying Google is the be all end all. That's not what I'm saying. But why hasn't Microsoft Docs like adopted
Microsoft Word
or Microsoft Word, whatever.
Yeah.
Why hasn't it adopted the same shareability, the same, when you're working on something, I can actually see what you're doing. I could see all of that. I could see everything that's going on.
Yeah.
It's so much more user friendly and it's so much more team friendly. That's what the big advantage is. I don't understand why anybody still uses that shit. Is it security? Like, what the fuck is it?
I think like these larger organizations pay for the Microsoft package, the Microsoft suite. Maybe it's, I don't know, cheaper, or maybe they've been around for fucking 100
It's not really,
years.
because we use Google, and I looked into this. I looked into before, going on the Google suite and everything. I looked into what was the most advantageous platform for us to use as a group, company wide.
Yeah.
With all of the different companies, everything. It's Google. It was Google. That's it. It's.
Yeah,
I don't know, and there was only really the two options. Like, there's a couple other rinky-dink things, but it would have been like, okay, email for this, and then Sheets and or something else. You still have to use the docs and the Sheets and stuff like that from another one of the platforms. So you might as well just
do everything.
Yeah. Right. So, and then Google was also. It's just easy, you know. It was just such an easier platform to use across the board. Being arguably a tech company that happens to produce products. Yeah. I don't get why even still it might. I don't know. Like what is it? Legacy? Like I don't understand it. It's fucking so shit.
It might be it. Like
so shit.
So anyway, so you know how like sometimes when you're taking something from a bullshit like Microsoft Word document and you're transferring it over to a Google Doc and then it fucks up the formatting. A certain page is skipped and you can't get that text back up. Just all these are like annoying fucking things. Yeah. So what I've been using it for recently is I'll just take all this like text, I'll throw it into ChatGPT and I'll tell it to format it in a certain way. Right. So I'm like, okay, take this text and just do it as like standard paragraph formatting or whatever, where it's like indented on the first line. It's just clean. Copy all the text, it'll do it. Then throw it in Google Docs and it's fine. What I used it for yesterday was I wanted to pull a bunch of data from Shopify, and I wasn't able to like export like a certain like list of customers, right? So I was like, okay, I want to get all these this list of this customer's orders on here. But if I just copy and paste all of it into Excel, all the formatting's fucked up and whatever. So I just copied
it'll go like
everything
one line.
on the screen.
It'll only be like one line. Yeah.
So I just copied everything on the screen as just pure text, threw it into ChatGPT, and I was like, hey, put this in chart format for me or table format, and just did it, threw it over there. I was able to summarize the like how much the customer spent in a matter of like that took me 5 seconds, whereas like formatting this before would have taken me fucking 30 minutes or God knows how long, right? Or I just wouldn't have done it because I'm like, that's going to take way too long.
Interesting.
Right. So I'm able to, okay, so this person spent since this point in time, copy all of it, send it over. Okay, done. 10 seconds.
Fuck. Yeah. What a big benefit.